Shana Tova. We are living in a time. We're living in a time. The time is now. Wake up. We are living in a time when both certainty, the clarity, conviction, and confidence which allow us to act, and uncertainty, the doubt, curiosity, capacity for questioning, which allow us to reflect on our actions, can be rare and precious resources. Just yesterday, on the way to Tashlich, I turned to my fellow Cooperberg Ritmaster rabbinical intern and said, I have a great sense of direction, and I am completely certain the pier is that way. And we immediately came upon a sign literally indicating I had marched us confidently in the wrong direction. So while it feels risky to question certainty in a time when the conviction that we can, should, and must act ethically feels imperative, both in our spiritual and collective lives, I am also holding how often this year I have been wrong, how many of our past certainties, individually and collectively, lie scattered around us. And I find myself longing for a way into not knowing, into an uncertainty, which can also lead us towards ethical action. Speaking of people marching confidently in the wrong direction, the Akedah. Why did our sages ordain that we should read the Akedah on Rosh Hashanah? This year, especially as we grapple with our collective fear, denial, ongoing struggles to even process a fraction of the pain in the world and in our lives, I find myself asking, this is the Torah for the new year? Abraham's unprotesting beeline to place his own child on the altar to prove his devotion to a terrifying God figure? Could we just not, with more really hard stuff right now? Take a breath if you need it. Rabbi Sheila Peltz Weinberg, in her infinite wisdom, counsels, the rabbis must have selected this text as a cautionary tale to inoculate us from religious fanaticism. They didn't want any of that nonsense messing up their project. An Abraham who pauses not even for a moment to question, to feel anger or grief, to discern, is not a model, but a warning blast to awaken us to the dangers of certainty. But then, what about the divine messenger who cries out from the heavens, do not do anything to him? A voice echoing through the generations, a great Tikiyah Gedolah, a clear and unbroken cry for turning back from a path of destruction. Perhaps in this sacred time, this text calls us to ask whether our certainties are that of Abraham or of the divine messenger. Are we entering another year binding ourselves to life-giving certainties or tied to destructive ones? And yet, I still find myself wanting more than a divine voice that comes in at the last possible moment after so much destruction has already been wrought, so many possibilities to turn towards a life-giving path passed by year after year. I want more than these two competing certainties. And so I turned the text over and over, and I found, hiding in plain sight, another story of certainty and sacrifice. The story of Hagar, which actually begins in Lech Lecha, a parsha before, when Hagar takes her life into her own hands and flees into the wilderness. There, at the edge of a spring of water, she encounters a divine messenger who gives her a troubling, in my humble opinion, directive to return to the place of oppression she is running from, promising her offspring will be made great. And then she returns. but not because she is without options, but because she makes a choice. And all choices involve sacrifice. Akin to Abraham in the Akedah, Hagar follows a divine command to make a sacrifice, in her case to submit herself to potential suffering with a promise for the future of her offspring. Yet, unlike Abraham, Hagar's sacrifice has been perhaps assumed, invisibilized, erased, and while it exists within the constraints of her life, of her subjugation, I wonder if naming Hagar's choice as a sacrifice, rather than ignoring it, acknowledges her autonomy, her power over this choice, even within her powerlessness over so many other things. Perhaps the question of certainty is not actually as simple as whether our certainties are life-giving or destructive. Perhaps the question is, am I willing to make new decisions, see new possibilities with new information? Hagar names God Adonai Roi, the God who sees me, and Abraham names the place of the Akedah Adonai Yireh, God will see. In both of their intertwined stories, we find Hagar and Abraham unable to see another way forward. In their most challenging moments, they are literally the only adult in the room. What might they have been able to see, imagine, do differently with the benefit of other people there, asking them to pause, advocating for them, or rebuking them, just sitting with them, giving them time and space to see things differently. In Midrashim on the Akedah, the rabbis imagine a host of melachim, divine messengers, gathered in various groupings right above the Akedah. From their midst emerge cries of protest, angels quoting psukim, words of Torah directly to God, holding the divine to account for their own promises about a future about to be destroyed. And as Abraham raises his hand against Isaac, a divine messenger is sent forth, calling, Abraham, Abraham, and it is as though he is shocked awake, and suddenly he sees the ram in the bushes. And in that heartbeat, between when the messenger cries out and Abraham actually stills his hand, 3 tears fell from among the divine messengers, destroying the knife he held in his hand. When Abraham and Sarah were visited by 3 divine messengers announcing Sarah's pregnancy, we learn from the rabbis that melachim, divine messengers, can only have one job. And yet, here we see groupings of divine messengers gathered around the Akedah. If only 2 of their voices compel the divine to action, and only 1 of their tears rained down to destroy the knife, what were the rest of them doing? What were their jobs in that moment? Perhaps there was a divine messenger from among them, stationed at every turn, at every action verb, not just at the last moment, but every stop of the way. Perhaps a messenger cried out from the wood pile as the axe blistered Abraham's hands and the wood itself splintered his tender flesh. Perhaps one messenger awakened Sarah to take Isaac out of Abraham's grasp, and she ran out just seconds too late. Perhaps a messenger called out with each item he loaded onto the donkey, and another with each step he took. And perhaps another messenger's job was to turn Abraham's words to Isaac that God will see to the sacrifice from a false reassurance into a prayer, a plea, a command, carrying these words up to God, God's self. Another messenger arriving every hour to beseech God to act. And maybe one messenger whispered into Abraham's right ear each night the words of medieval commentator Bechor Shor, "Can't you see that offer him up doesn't mean what you think it means? and another to whisper into Abraham's left ear the words of Gersonides, "The test is actually to find another way." We live between the certainty of Abraham and the divine messenger, the unquestioning action and the final intervention, and perhaps we also live, especially now, within the voices of all of these unheard messengers along the way. Perhaps they each went forth not knowing which one Abraham would hear, which one would make the difference, yet knowing that both their certainty and their not knowing, their questions, their protest, needed to be given voice, just in case it was the one that was heard, whether in that moment or in the generations to come. This year, how might we begin to discern the difference between life-giving and destructive certainties? How might we live into a generative not knowing, practice making new decisions with new information, pause to hear and see the divine messengers surrounding us who might guide us to see the ram in the bushes or to see the sustaining spring we've been to before, especially when we cannot see another way. Perhaps we can ask each other, gather people around us who will ask, does this way of being tune me into the divinity of all life? Is this action life-giving and life-sustaining? Does it challenge me to make perhaps a choice, perhaps even a sacrifice from a place of love? And is both the way I get there and where I am trying to go good? Are there other possible ways I could get there, and can I take a moment to look for them? Am I recognizing my own power and powerlessness as I aim to draw forth more goodness, truth, and justice? And are there messengers right here beside me when I lay down and when I rise up, who I can turn to when I cannot see another way? Shana Tova.